All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem, beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us. Begin by thanking our sponsors. Thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul. Shane Dean Avram Kelman dedicating the Shiurim this month in honor of Yechiel's engagement to Alana Falik in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman, and Alexander and Frederica David Zechron Livracha. To thank Barak, Maya, Sandy Hoffman, Dora Limos, and Avi Malamed for dedicating Shurim this month in memory of Ruvain ben Emmanuel Zechron Livracha. To thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this month, Mischus for Refuah Shalima, for Shulamis Bas Susha. The Daf Yomi for dedicating the Shir this month, and Mischus for Refuah Shalima for Yehuda ben Michal. Our week of learning sponsors: Louis Goldberg thanking Hashem for the engagement of his grandson Eli Bogart to Rivi Golaskov, daughter of Steve Golaskov. And our week of learning sponsors: Joseph and Ellen Miller, Iris and Ed Miller and family, Leslie and Adam Rosen and family, Lezecher Nishmas Richard Berman, beloved brother-in-law, uncle, Neshama Shtav and Aliyah, and the family Einachama. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today: Stephanie Rabinowitz in memory of her father Moshe Ben Chaim, and Said and Simon Haken Li'ilui Nishmas, Said's father Moshe Ben Bashia Kohen Zechron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamos will have an Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Ayin Aleph 71. And also take the opportunity to wish a Mazel Tov to Reuven Goodman on the occasion of the marriage of his daughter Leora tonight. V'shah Tova u'mitzlachas. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. So we are picking up today. Today's daf is Ayin Aleph 71. We are picking up on Ayin Amud Bey's 6 lines into the wide lines. Yeah, Reuven, did I just invite everyone to the wedding? Is that what I just did effectively? Okay, whatever. All right, so let's begin. So six lines into the wide lines. So it says the Gemara as follows. So we'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah introduced us to this interesting case of a man who is going ahead and making a neder, prohibiting his wife from getting any benefit from him. So essentially, again, yesterday we were speaking about the maximum duration of this neder, which would require or trigger the need for immediate divorce. But let's assume for a moment that the neder falls into what we call the acceptable range. So the Mishnah said, let's assume for our purposes right now that the acceptable range is 30 days. 30 days. Again, Rabbi Yehuda came along and made a distinction between Yisrael and a Kohen. But we'll go with 30 days. So what's the halacha? During those 30 days, he has to go ahead and support his wife through an intermediary. A parnes. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. We'll say, I don't understand. What does it matter if he's using a parnes, if he's using an intermediary? After all, at the end of the day, isn't the parnes performing the shlichus of the husband? Now, also remember, we have a concept by shlichus that what? Shlucho shel adam kimoso, right? A person's agent is like an extension of him. So it's very nice that the husband is not supporting his wife himself, but lemaisa, again, isn't his agent an extension of him? So effectively, the husband is supporting his wife. And if he's supporting his wife, then what? He's in violation of his own self-imposed neder. Rav Huna, no, what's the case? Ba'omer kol hazan eino mafsid. Interesting case. It's where the husband puts out like an announcement. And what's the announcement? Whoever sustains my wife will not lose. And I will say, whoever sustains my wife will not lose. There's another way of saying that. What? Whoever sustains my wife, you could come back to me and I'll pay you back. So essentially, he's not going ahead and tasking anyone explicitly, but rather he's going ahead and simply saying, whoever takes care of my wife will not lose. To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. Even if you use a lashon like this, isn't the person effectively acting as the husband's shaliach? Let's listen to this. Tonight we learned, Mishaya mushlach babar. It will say if someone ultimately again was thrown into a pit. Va'amar kala shamei kolo. So we'll say, so Rashi points out over here. Actually, let's leave it. So we'll say, so again, he's thrown into the bar, right? Obviously, we're talking about a situation where he's afraid of dying. He doesn't want his wife to be an almana. He wants to be a grusha, for whatever the reason. So Mishaya mushlach babar. Va'amar kala shamei kolo yichtov get liishto. And he cries out, whoever hears my voice should write a get for my wife. What's the halacha? Hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu. Ultimately, whoever hears it should write it and deliver it. And I will say, in order to write it and deliver it, what do you have to be? You have to be the shaliach of the husband, right? In other words, I can't go right and I say to myself, you know what? I was just over at Reuven and Rachel's house. It looks like their marriage is terrible, right? Terrible shalom bayis. I'm going to write a get, right, on behalf of Reuven. I'm his friend. I've known him for a long time. I'm going to do him a tova. I'm going to write him a get. Right? You can't do that. A get can only be given through the koach of the baf, the koach of the husband. See, here's an interesting case, right? Remember, at the end of the day, what's happening over here? So Reuven's in the pit. Reuven's in the pit. He calls out, he says, whoever hears me, right, whoever hears me, go ahead and write the get. And I will say, and whoever hears Reuven could write the get, which shows you that even a more general statement, not necessarily tasking an individual, but expressing a desire for something to occur, creates shlichos. If that's the case, we're back to square one, because even if Reuven is saying in this case over here, kol hazan alai, right? Or kol hazan eno mafsid, excuse me. Whoever sustains my wife will not go ahead and lose out, and somebody goes ahead and supports the wife. That should be shlichos. To which the Gemara says, Hachi hashtahasam ka'amar yichtov. We'll say there's a big difference. In the get case, the husband is giving a directive, yichtov. While it's true that he's not actually being memana, he's not appointing any specific individual, he is asking for a targeted action. Whoever hears this instruction should write the get. Hacha mika amar yazun, kalazan kamar. Here, the husband is not saying someone should support my wife. Rather, what is he saying? Whoever does it. So we'll say. So the Gemara is suggesting over here is the fact that the husband is not making a direct ask. You see, in the get case, he's making a direct ask. Whoever hears my voice, write the get. So the Gemara says, okay, he's asking explicitly for someone to do something that creates shlichus. In the Gemara's case over here, he's saying, whoever sustains my wife, he's not asking for something directly actionable. He's not asking anyone to do anything. He's making a general statement that's not shlichus. The Gemara says, Vaha Amrabi Ami Bidl. I'm sorry. Good. Vaha Amrabi Ami Bidleiki Hitiru Lomar Kol Mechabe Eno Mafsid Bidleika. So also is interesting. So Masech Shabbos that by a fire, Bidleika is a fire. In the case of a fire, let's remember again. Chas v'shalom. Let's say there's a fire in someone's home. And assuming there's no sakonas nefashos, there's no danger to life. Let's assume that for just a moment. So we'll say, so the halacha is, if there's just going to be a monetary loss, you can't put out the fire on Shabbos. It's a pretty dramatic halacha, right? So again, Reuven's house is burning down. Again, there's no neighbors, no gas lines, no electricity. So the only thing he stands to lose are his possessions. He's not allowed to go ahead and extinguish the fire. What can he do? He could call out and he could say, Kol mechabe eno mafsid. Right? Whoever puts out the fire will not lose out. Now I will say, now obviously, this is a case of what we call Amir L'Nachri. This is where you're instructing a non-Jew to do malacha, and because I'm not explicitly tasking the non-Jew to do something, it's mutter. It's mutter in this case of dramatic loss. So the Gemara says, Bileika. Now the Gemara says, this is permitted in the case of a fire. Now it's telling you that a parallel case somewhere else wouldn't work. What does it come to exclude? It must be coming to exclude like the case in our Mishnah, where halacha the husband made a neder, and he makes the statement, Kol hazan alai, whoever sustains my wife, it's on me, I'll pay you back. So obviously it's coming to say that a case like that does not work. To which the Gemara says, lo, Shabbos. No, it's actually coming to exclude other isurim of Shabbos. That lest you think that you could do this, you could employ this method to get a guy to do other malachas. That's not true. This is only dafka in a case where the house is burning down. Okay, massive rabbis. Rabbi Zikasha. Hamudar hanami chaveira ve'in lo mayochal. Was a very interesting case. That what's the halacha? Hamudar hanami chaveira ve'in lo mayochal. So we'll say here's an interesting situation. I make a neder that Reuven is not permitted to get any benefits from me. Right? I can make such a neder. I prohibit any benefits from myself to Reuven. Now what happens? Reuven is destitute, and he doesn't have food. He doesn't have food. But I would like to get him food. But what's the problem? What's the problem? I can't because of the neder. So what do I do in such a situation like this? Go to a shopkeeper who you have a good relationship with. And say to the shopkeeper, Ish ploni mudra hanami meni. Reuven can't get any benefits from me. Ve'eni odea ma'aselo. And I don't know what to do with him, for him. So I'll say, see what's happening over here? It's a shtickle setup. In other words, I want to be able to help Reuven. But Lamaisa, I can't because I made a neder. So I go to the shopkeeper who I have, the storekeeper who I have a relationship with, and I say, I wish there was something I could do for Reuven, right? I wish I could get him food. I can't because I made a neder. Okay, so what does the shopkeeper pick up on over here? Right. So why'd you make a neder? That's a different discussion, right? So what does the shopkeeper do? The shopkeeper goes, gives Reuven whatever it is that he needs, and then comes back to me for payment. So the Gemara says, Rosai, so what do you see from here? Hachihu deshari. So in this situation, it's permitted. Aval kol hazan eno mafsid lo. So Rosai, what you begin to see, by the way, is that there are different ways in which a person could structure the non-ask, right? So in this case over here, I will say, essentially, what am I doing to the shopkeeper? I'm not even hinting. What am I doing? I'm telling a story, right? We saw this, by the way, in Smichas Chavra, we saw this by Amir al-Nachri, accounts like that. I am weaving a narrative, right? I'm weaving a narrative. So coming to the shopkeeper and say, Reuven's fallen on such hard times. I can't help him because I made a neder. But I wish there was some way to help him. So the Gemara says, great. What does the shopkeeper do? Shopkeeper goes, helps Reuven, and then what? Comes back to me for repayment. So I will say, is there any ask that was being made in that statement? Did I make an ask of the Chenveni? Was there an ask? There was no ask. All there was a narrative, and the Chenveni went ahead and took action based on the narrative. So the Gemara says, we'll call it the narrative model. That's what's mutter when you've made a neder against someone. But I will say, here's the problem. When a man, let's go back to our Mishnah, right? Husband made a neder that his wife can't get any benefit from him. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, establish a parnes, someone to support the wife. How can you establish someone to support the wife? That parnes is what? What is he? He's a shaliach. What's Allah with a shaliach? Shlucho shel adam kimoso. A person shliach is an extension of himself. So the parnes supporting the wife is effectively the same thing as the husband supporting the wife, which is then a violation of the husband's neder. To which the Gemara says, no, what's the case? The case is where the husband just makes an announcement. Kol hazan alai. Whoever supports my wife, come back to me for repayment. The Gemara says, that's still shlichos. Why is it shlichos? Because it's actional. Because at the end of the day, you're asking someone, while you're not directly asking someone, you're making an ask. As opposed to weaving a narrative. So the Gemara says, Aval kol hazan eino mafsid lo, to which the Gemara says, Lo mi bai kamar. Lo mi bai kol hazan eino mafsid de la alma ka'amar. The Gemara says, no, just the opposite. Kol hazan is even better. You will say, why is kol hazan even better? Because whereas kol hazan does have a quasi-ask aspect to it, an actional aspect, but I will say, it's what? It's not directed at anyone. You see, who is the husband talking to when he says kol hazan alai? Who is he talking to? The Welt, right? He's talking to the world. He's not talking to anyone specifically, right? He's not making a specific ask. Aval hai kevan deragil etzlo v'ka'azol ka'amrle keman de'amrle zil havle at dami. See, Rabbi said the Gemara suggests the shopkeeper case is worse. Why is the shopkeeper case worse? Because Rabbi say, while it's true that I'm not making an ask, right? While it's true that I'm just weaving a narrative, but who am I weaving a narrative, making an ask, or who am I weaving a narrative to? Someone who I have a relationship with. And Rabbi said, what kind of relationship? A financial relationship with. In other words, this is my shopkeeper. This is where I do my shopping. And he extends credit to me all of the time. So the Gemara says, I would have thought that ultimately, again, it's only in the case of kol hazan alai that works Why? Because I'm not making an ask of anyone specific. I'm just making a statement to the Welt. That should be okay. But the shopkeeper case, whereas although I'm weaving a narrative to a specific individual, I might have thought that should not work. Kamash Malon, the shopkeeper case does work, and certainly Kol Hazan Alai works as well. Incredible. So I will say, by the way, so that's how the Gemara is going to set up this case, right? So I will say, so just to kind of frame this, Ruvain makes a neder against Rachel, his wife, and he says, you are not permitted to get any type of benefit from me. So I'll say, what effectively does that do? Let's call it now for a month. Let's make it within the permitted range. For 3 weeks, he can't get any benefit from me. Okay. So I'll say, so now he's effectively made a neder that prohibits him from supporting his wife. What does the Mishnah say? Yamid Parnes. He should go ahead and establish a third party to support his wife. How is he establishing the third party? Can he directly go over to a third party and say, do me a favor, Shimon, support my wife? No. Why not? Because then it creates a shlichus. Shlucho shal adam kimoso. A shaliach is an extension of the self, and thereby he be effectively violating his own neder. So what does he do? He goes over to a group of people, or even to one individual, and he just makes a general announcement. Kol hazan alai. Listen, Rachel needs to be supported. I can't support her for the neder, because of the neder. Whoever does support her will not lose, which effectively means whoever supports her, come to me with the bill, I'll pay the bill. That does not create shlichus. Why doesn't it create shlichus? Ultimately, again, because he is making a general statement. One second, what about the get case? What about the get case? Where ultimately, again, he also made a general statement. Kol hashameh, whoever hears my voice, write a get. That's also a general statement. Yet that is shlichus. Why is that case different? Targeted action. There he was saying, whoever hears my voice, write the get. He's giving an explicit command, and therefore that affects shlichus. Incredible. So Gufa, let's analyze this case a little bit more. Gufa, Hamudra Hano Mechaveira Ve'inlo Ayochal. So let's go back to the case. So Reuven makes a neder that he's not going to give any benefit to Shimon. Now Shimon is destitute. So what happens? So as I saw, we just said this case. So Reuven goes over to the shopkeeper that has a relationship with. He says, Shimon has nothing to eat, but I can't help him because I made a neder. And what happens? Who knows sin lo ubava no talmizeh. So the shopkeeper gives Shimon what he needs and comes to collect the money from Reuven. Next case. Beiso livnos, ugedero ligdar, visadeo liktsar. So we'll say similar case, right? I made a neder, right? Or we'll just call Reuven Shimon. Reuven made a neder not to give any benefit to Shimon, right? And what happens? Shimon, he has a home that he's building. So we'll say, so what happens? He doesn't have enough money to pay his workers, or he needs to build a wall, doesn't have enough money to pay his workers, or he needs to go and harvest his field, doesn't have enough money to pay his workers. Now we'll say, what's the problem? Reuven wants to help out. But what? He can't. Why? Because he made a neder from giving any benefit to Shimon. So what can he do? Holech eitzel, Poland arigilan etzlo, va'omrim lo ish ploni mudran lamimeni, v'eno dema eselo, hein osin imo uban v'notlin scharan. So I'll say very similar case. So Reuben goes over to workers. Now let's say Reuben has workers. So he goes over to his workers. He says, you know what, Shimon, his construction project stalled, right? He can't pay his workers. He can't build his wall. He can't harvest his field. I wish there was someone. I don't know what to do for him. The workers chap. The workers go. They do the work for Shimon, and they come back and they collect payments from Reuven. Totally mutter. Shabbos say again, why is it totally mutter? Why is it totally mutter? 2 elements. Number one, in other words, when we say mutter, why aren't the workers considered to be the shluchim of Reuven? 2 reasons. Number one, there was not an explicit ask of any individual. Number 2, there was no actional component. So because no direct ask, no call to action, therefore no creation of shlichos. Listen to this next case. Very interesting. So now watch this. So Reuven and Shimon, right? 2 guys. Reuven makes a neder that Shimon can't get any benefit from him. So now Reuven and Shimon are walking together. Reuven has what to eat. Shimon doesn't have what to eat. Now both say, you'll say to yourself, 1 second, if Reuven made a neder not to give any benefit from Shimon, then what's the obvious kasha on this case? why are they together? Right? Why are they together? So I must say, so first of all, simple answer is relationships are complex, right? And sometimes even people you don't necessarily like, you still have to interact with. But I must say, I think it's such an incredible metaphor as well to our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam, if you think about it. That sometimes, not that I'm mudar hana'ah me Hashem, not that I ever make a neder that I'm not going to have anything to do with Hashem, but sometimes I act that way. Right? Sometimes I do things, I behave in ways, I engage in actions which actively distance me from the Ribono Shel Olam. Yet, no matter how much I distance myself from Hashem, my life is always Hayu Mahalchin B'derech. I always walk with Hashem, even when I distance myself from Hashem. This is the great, in Chassidus, they call this Ratzah V'Shov, that life is this constant forward and backward movement. I'm with Hashem, I'm apart from Hashem. I'm close to Hashem, I'm far from Hashem. But even when I'm far from Hashem, nevertheless, my life is always Hayu Mahalchin B'derech. The incredible part about a Jew is I always walk with the Ribono Shel Olam, even when I am far from the Ribono Shel Olam. So the Gemara says over here, so Reuven and Shimon are walking together. Now we have a problem, right? What's our problem? Our problem is that Reuven has food, Shimon does not. But Reuven can't just simply give Shimon his food because Lamaiseh made a neder. So what does he do? Very interesting. So what does he do? So no sin la'achar l'shum matana v'lo notel v'ochel u'muter. So we'll say, listen to this. So the simple answer is, hopefully Levy's there also. Right? Hopefully there's another party. So what does Reuven do? Reuven gives the food to Levy as a gift, right? And Levy can then give it to Shimon. Okay, that's the easiest way. So the Gemara says, Ve'im ein sham acher. What happens if Levy's not there? It's literally just Reuven and Shimon. So what does Reuven do? Maniach al gabe hasel al gabe hageder v'omer harei hei mufkarin l'chol mi sheyachbots v'halo notel v'ochel l'muter. Okay, so what can Reuven do? Take the food, put it on a rock or whatever, put it on a fence, put it somewhere, and say, the food is hefker. The food is hefker. Okay, what could happen after Reuven makes the food hefker? What could happen? Shimon could take it and enjoy it. Rabbi Yossi Oser. Rabbi Yossi says, no. If there's a third party, I agree. But the concept of going ahead and making the food hefker does not work. Does not work. The Rabbi will say, why doesn't it work? Amar Rav, my time's Rabbi Yossi. I don't say that sounds like a great idea. So why doesn't it work to go ahead and make the food hefker? Rabbi says, incredible. Gzera mishum, tapavayin aleph, maisa de beis choron. Because of the story in Beis Choron. So without getting into all the specifics of the story of Beis Choron was a case of a person who made something hefker. Again, it was a wedding story. It was a wedding story where Lemais, again, one person had made a neder precluding someone else from going ahead and benefiting from them. The person who made the neder was then making a wedding. He wanted the person who was under the ban of the neder to participate in the wedding. So what did he do? He made all of his possessions hefker. Now, once he made it hefker, what would that allow for? The person who was under the neder ban to come and enjoy the wedding. The problem is someone else heard the Baal Simcha make everything hefker. He said, fantastic, this is the best wedding I've ever been to. Right? So what does he do? He comes and he acquires everything for himself and he makes everything hektish. There's always a guy like that. Right? There's like the frum guy, right? Make it hektish. So he'll say, so what happens? So the Baal Simcha hears this and the Baal Simcha says, hold up there. I didn't mean to make it fully hefker. I just made to make it hefker enough. Not like some people only need it kosher enough, right? Hefker enough. I need it to be hefker enough. Hefker enough for what? For the guy under the ban to come to the simcha. So I will say, what that exposed is this concept that sometimes people make something hefker and they don't really mean to make it hefker. So Rabbi Yossi is worried about this in this case as well. I will say, let's take this. By the way, how can you go ahead? What's the litmus test if someone is making something genuinely hefker? The litmus test is, do they care who takes possession of it? If you care who takes possession of the hefker item, then what? It's not really hefker. So Rabbi says, that's what Rabbi Yossi is concerned about in this case. When Reuben puts the food down and he says it's hefker. Right? I'll say, we know, why is he making it hefker? Why is he making it? He wants someone to take it. Who does he want to take it? Shimon. So I will say, Vaharaya, if Yisachar were to come along and scoop up the food, would Reuven be okay with that? Absolutely not. So if Rabbi Yossi says, don't tell me this is hefker. That's not hefker. It's not hefker. In other words, you're trying to utilize hefker as a mechanism to transfer something to someone who you can't legally transfer something to, but you don't really mean to make it ownerless. Rabbi Yossi says hefker means the act of abdicating over or releasing any claim of ownership to the point that you have absolutely no say or no kavana for who gets it after you. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi does not like the hefker model. Good. Let's go weiter. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, B'Yisrael Chodesh. So also remember again, let's go down to the Mishnah. So remember again, first case, now we've effectively explained the first clause in the Mishnah, right? So Reuven is married to Rachel, makes a neder that she cannot get any benefit from him. So now we've established that halacha l'maisa, as long as the neder is less than 30 days, Reuven establishes a third party to support his wife. He can't really directly establish it. It's kala zan alai. Good. Now Rabbi Yehuda came along and said, well, if he's a Kohen, if he could have the neder up to 2 months. For Yisrael, only 1 month. For a Kohen, up to 2 months. We explained why the distinction. Because again, a Kohen, once he divorces his wife, he cannot go ahead and remarry her. So therefore, I want to give them a little bit of a longer time to be able to navigate this circumstance. To which the Gemara says, Hainu Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda is effectively saying the same thing as the Tanakama. In other words, the Tanakama said the neder can last up to 30 days. Rabbi Yehuda said up to 30 days. Amrabaye Kohenes Asal Ashmina. No, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda is really coming to introduce the chilik of a Kohen. That's what he's not coming to argue on the Tanakama. He agrees. For a typical Yisrael, the acceptable duration, again, I will say, there's no acceptable duration, but Lamaisa, for our purposes, the acceptable duration that doesn't trigger the need for an immediate divorce in Kesuva is 30 days. Rabbi Yehuda is coming to introduce to us that for a Kohen, it'll be 60 days. Rava Amar Chodesh Mali B'Chodesh Chaser Ikiminayu. Rava says, no, the other possible nafkamin, Rava say, between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama is as follows. Rava say, when a man makes a neder for Lamed Yom, what does Lamed Yom mean? Does Lamed Yom mean 30 days, or does Lamed Yom mean a month? I will say, there's an nafkamina. Why is there an nafkamina? Some months are 29 days, some months are 30 days. So it could be that the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama might also be in the definition of a month. The Tanakama is saying month means 30 days. Rabbi Yehuda is saying month means 29 days. Okay, Amarav. So lo shana ela b'mefarish. Furthermore, I will say this whole situation, this whole discussion over here, is where the husband explicitly articulated the duration of the neder. Look at Rashi, b'mefarish, second line down from the top. Shapir shloshim yom hu delo kafilan lehotzi eliyam od parnes. Shabbos, now listen to this. So Rav says, when we have this concept that you could wait out the neder a little bit, that's only if the husband explicitly articulates the duration of the neder. So if Reuven makes a neder saying, I hereby make a neder that my wife cannot get any benefit from me for 30 days, okay, we have a mechanism for that, right? He establishes a third party provides for the support of the wife, he doesn't have to immediately divorce her. However, says Rav, aval b'stam, let's say just a man makes a stam neder that he's not going to give any benefit to his wife. Ultimately, Rav says, if it's without duration, it immediately triggers the need for divorce and ksuba. Shmuel says, no. Afilu b'stam lo yotzi shema yimatzei pesach lenidro. Shmuel says very interesting. Shmuel says, no. Even if he made a neder without duration, now that's a terrible thing. But l'maisa, we don't force them to get divorced immediately. Rather, what do? We still give them 30 days, right? We give them some amount of time because maybe the husband will find, the Pesach will find an opening to revoke his neder. So Rav say, fundamental machlokes in Rav and Shmuel, dafka in a case of a neder with an inexplicit duration. So Rav says, inexplicit duration, divorce, ksuva immediately. Shmuel says, no. Give them some time because maybe the husband will work a way out of the neder. The Gemara says, 1 second, we already learned this machlokes. We already learned this machlokes one time before. This nan we learned hamadir ishto mitash mishnah. Said this was the previous mishnah. If a man makes a neder precluding himself from getting any benefit from relations with his wife, so Beishamai omrim shtei shabbos. Beishamai say 2 weeks is the maximum duration. Or Beisila Shabbos Achas. Beisila says 1 week is the maximum duration. Va'amarav, machlokes b'mefarish. Rav says the machlokes is only when you explicitly articulate the duration of the neder. Aval b'stam. But let's say a husband made a neder prohibiting himself from getting benefits from relations with his wife, and there is no duration attached to the neder. Yotzi la'alter v'yitin ksuva. Rav says he has to divorce her immediately, and ultimately pay the ksuva. Shmuel says, no. Afilu b'stam nami lo yotzi shema yibatse pesach l'nedra. Shmuel says, no. Wait, give it some time. Maybe he'll be able to find an opening to revoke his neder. So Rabbi say the point of it is same machlokas. It's the same machlokas Rav and Shmuel, right? Same machlokas. To which the Gemara says, why do I need both? Tzricha. Di itmar bahi b'hakam barad b'shum d'lo efshar b'parnes. So say, had it only articulated Rav's position in the case of Tashmish, I would have said, if a husband makes a neder that he can't get any benefit from relations with his wife, and there's no duration attached to that neder, that triggers the need for immediate divorce in ksuva. Why? Because Rabbi say there's no way to sustain her, so to speak, through a third party, right? So l'maisa, again, those are services which cannot be outsourced, right? So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, maybe that's where immediate divorce and ksuva is triggered. However, but in our case of our Mishnah, the efshar b'parnes even modei l'Shmuel. But in our case, you can't have a third party that provides support. So maybe Rav would agree with Shmuel that ultimately give husbands some time to figure out a way out of this neder. Furthermore, again, had it just stated our present case, in our case, that's where Shmuel says, even with a neder without an explicit duration, give the husband some time. Why? Because you could support the wife through a third party. But in the case of Tashmish, where there is obviously no third party that can help, say ultimately, again, he would be molded to Rav, that ultimately a neder like this, not to support one's wife, would trigger, without a duration, would trigger an immediate need for divorce and ksuva. Therefore, tzricha. Therefore, I will say, I need the machlokas to be articulated in both cases. Incredible. So therefore, I will say, what we have over here, interestingly enough, is a fundamental machlokas between Rav and Shmuel, in a case where you make one of these nedarim without an explicit duration. So we saw it by Tashmish, now we're seeing it by support. So Rav says a husband makes a neder not to support his wife, and there's no duration, triggers need for immediate divorce with payment of ksuva. Shmuel says, give it some time. Now, how much time I will say? We would assume that how much time is Shmuel giving it? 30 days, because that's the maximum duration under which this neder would be acceptable. Give it 30 days. You might as well give it 30 days because lamais, again, that'll give hopefully the husband the opportunity to figure out a way out of the neder. Incredible. So let's go back there. Tanan, we learned Hamadris ichtosh lo titom echam mikol peiros. So let's go through the Mishnah now. Mishnah gave another case. That what? A man makes a neder. So let's remember again, it turned out, Rashi already told us in the Mishnah, although Rashi spoils a little bit for the Gemara, but it's okay, that a neder is being made. That she's not going to eat any kind of fruit, right? So the lashon of the hamadris ishto. So literally translated means a man makes a neder that his wife can't eat a particular type of fruit. Yotzi b'tein ksuva. He has to divorce her, give her a ksuva immediately. So says, well, let's analyze this. So bishlam of the Rav kevan kan bistam kam mefarish. So according to Rav, this makes sense. So also what the Gemara is bothered by is, why does that neder trigger the need for instantaneous divorce, right? So here's what's interesting, right? So according to Rav, it makes sense, because according to Rav, any time a husband makes a neder restricting his wife, and there's no duration, that triggers the need for immediate divorce and ksuba. Elo l'Shmuel kasha, but according to Shmuel says, halach l'maisa, you should give a little bit of time. To which the Gemara says, no. What's the case? Here we go, Bosai. What's the case? Hacham askinon kigon shenadrahi. The Bible says the cases where Rachel says, I hereby make a neder that I cannot get any benefit. I'm never going to eat apples. Not going to eat apples. And what happens? V'kiyem la ihu. And the husband affirms the neder. The Kesuvos Rabbi Meir says, Hu nasan nosin etzba bein shineha. So also we've seen this expression before. Right? We've seen this expression before. That halacha l'maisa, when a husband affirms the neder of his wife, who is considered to have made that neder? Is it the husband because it's his power of affirmation that makes it stand? Or it's the wife because she's the one who's articulated the neder? So the expression Rabbi say is like, who put whose finger between her teeth? So actually, the way the expression works is, he put her finger between her teeth. In other words, the idea of the making of the neder represents like what? The biting of your finger, which is an actively detrimental act. The shaila is, who put the wife's finger between her teeth? Did she put, it's like a convoluted expression, but okay, right? Did she, it works better in the Aramaic, right? Or in the Gemara, right? Did he put her finger between her teeth, i.e. he's at fault for the neder? Or she put her finger between, so the Gemara says, Shmuel holds like Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir holds that halacha l'maisa, he put her finger between her teeth, which means he is responsible for the neder. Because he is responsible for the neder, therefore what? We penalize him and we make him divorce her with ksuva right now. Sorry, Meir, who knows? We'll say, is that true? Does Rabbi Meir hold that when the husband affirms the neder, he is the one who placed her finger in between it? In other words, he's responsible. Vatanya, we learn what's very interesting is Vatanya, Ha'isha Shenadra benazir. Listen to this. Let's say a woman made a neder that she's going to become a nazir. V'shama bayla v'lo hefer lo, and the husband heard and he didn't annul the neder. He didn't know the neder. We'll say first white line, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda Omrim, he nasna esba bein shinaha. She placed her finger between her teeth. See, Rabbi Meir is on record as saying what? She's responsible for the neder. Lefichach, imratza bala hafer yafer. Therefore, if the husband wants to annul the neder, he can annul the neder. Vim amar ifshi be'isha nadranis. And if he says, I don't want a neder-making wife, right? So I'll say it's dangerous to be married to a neder-making woman, right? Because l'maisa, again, the nedarim are dangerous. So if he says, listen, you know what, you're starting to make neder naziros, I am not into that. He says, I don't want this. Teisei shlo b'ksuva. Halach l'maisa, he could divorce her, and he doesn't have to pay her a ksuva. Again, we'll see why that is. Why so severe? He'll say, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Elazar, Omrim, who knows in Esav and Shina? No. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Elazar says, no. It's not her fault, it's his fault. Why? Because the neder is only effective if what? If he affirms it. Therefore what? So the Gemara says, so who knows in Etzva ben Shina? He placed her finger between her teeth. In other words, he's responsible. Ultimately, again, if the husband wants to annul the neder, he can do so. And if he says, I don't want to be married to a neder-making woman, that's fine. But Yotzi b'iteng suba. But he could divorce her, but it's a parak suba. I will say, but the point over here is what? Rabbi Meir is on record as saying that she is at fault for the neder, not him. So Shmuel says, you're right. Epoch, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda Omrim, who knows in Etzba, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Elazar Omrim, hinas. No, you're right. Just turn it around. Flip the shitas. Okay. For some Rabbi Yossi, hinas. Does Rabbi Yossi hold that when a wife makes a neder, that she is the one who is responsible? No, she placed her finger between her teeth, that she's responsible for making the neder? After all, v'hatanan. So I'll say, so you understand the tension over here? It's this unique situation by a wife, right? That when a wife makes a neder, the neder is only in effect if the husband affirms it, right? It still needs husband affirmation. So which is really a fascinating dynamic. So the shaila is, when a woman makes a neder, who do we view as being responsible for that neder? Is it the wife because she articulated it ultimately again, or is it the husband, right? Or is it the husband? Good. Or is it the husband, right? Or is it the husband, right? Because he shut off his ringer, right? Or is it the husband, right? Because he went ahead and affirmed it, right? That's the shaila. So says the Gemara, Sav Rabbi Yossi, he nasna. Does Rabbi Yossi hold that she played that it's her responsibility? Vatanan, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Banius shalonasan kitzva. Banius shalonasan kitzva. So we'll say, so what? So let's go back for just a moment. So we'll say this is Mishnah. Remember, last part of the Mishnah read as follows: Hamadris ishto shlo tiskashet be'achad mikol aminin. A man makes. So I'll say again. It sounds like a man is making a neder to prohibit his wife from shlo tiskashet be'achad mikol aminin. Rashi says over here not to put on perfume. So once again, remember, it sounds like the husband's making the neder, but in fact, it's not the husband making the neder. Who's making the neder? The wife is making the neder. So remember again, for anius, if the woman is poor, ultimately again shalom nasan kitzva. Right? So for a poor woman, the neder is only problematic if there's no duration attached to the neder. So the Gemara says, so therefore you see over here that Rabbi Meir holds, right? So look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, so I will say, so again, remember in that case, he has to divorce her, give her a ksuba. And I will say, the fact that he has to give her a ksuba indicates that the responsibility is his. his affirmation of the neder, ultimately again makes him responsible. So that's Rabbi Yossi, to which the Gemara says, Emo Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Omrim Hunosim, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Lazar, Omrim Hinas. Okay, so we'll say now the list is growing. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi hold that ultimately he's responsible. So Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Lazar hold that she's responsible. Really, Rabbi Huda Hinasna, does Rabbi Huda hold that she's responsible for the neder? But tonight we learned Rabbi Huda Omer, Bi Yisrael Yom Echad Yikayim. Right, ultimately I will say this is the case, Shalotit Om. Right, this is not, we're not getting into the specifics of the case, but this is the case ultimately where she makes a neder not to taste something. So Rabbi Huda says, Bi Yisrael Yom Echad Yikayim. Isra will say, so you see from here that halacha l'maisa, he's responsible. Ein Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yosim, Huno saying, Rabbi Lazar Omer, Hinasna. Then Tim Salomar Zuge Zuge, if you want to establish it in pairs. Ein Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Elazar Omrim Hinasna, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yosi Omrim Huno saying, Vastamadol Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, the point over here that's happening is, we have a machlokes, right? What's the machlokes? The machlokes is when the wife makes an answer and the husband affirms it, who is putting her finger between her teeth? Who is responsible for the ultimate chalos of the neder? Is it the wife because she articulated it, or is it the husband because he affirmed it? It's machlokes. And all we're trying to do over here is to firm up who's on which side. So Rabbi Yossi holds, in the case of a poor woman, right, where the neder was made that she's not going to put on perfume, it's only problematic if there's no duration attached to it. So what do you see from here? That the husband has the ability to annul the neder. So we'll say, now we're switching gears. Here's what we know. We have a machlokes, a general machlokes, about who is responsible for the neder that a wife makes. Is it she because she articulated it? Is it the husband because he affirmed it? Now we're switching gears. But we'll say, let's take a look at the last case of the Mishnah. What was the last case of the Mishnah? Halacha l'maisa, she makes a neder, I'm not going to wear perfume. So if she's a poor woman and she never went ahead and attached a duration to the neder, then he has to divorce her. So let me say again, if she's a rich woman, 30 days is the maximum duration. Now we'll say, now what's the point? Now we see from this Gemara that what? That if she made a neder not to put on perfume, then what? Husband has the ability to annul it. The Gemara says, or Minu, here's a kasha. Elu dvarim shabal mefer. The following are the list of nedarim that a husband has the ability to annul. Dvarim sheyesh ban inui nefesh. Now we'll say, what type of neder could a husband annul if his wife made it? Things that have some element of affliction associated. Because it's very important. Let's say a woman makes a neder, I'm going to say 5 kapitlach of Tehillim a day. Does the husband have the ability to annul that? The answer is no. Right? Why? Because it has nothing to do with him. Right? The husband only has the ability to annul nedarim that have something to do with him. So the Gemara says, for example, inui nefesh, afflictive nedarim. For example, so the Gemara says, im erchatz im lo erchatz, im es kashet im lo es kashet. Right? Ultimately, a husband, right? If a wife says, makes an neder, I'm not going to bathe. Right? I'm not going to adorn myself. Those are things that are inui nefesh, afflictive in nature, and therefore the husband has the ability to go and annul. Rabbi Yossi says no. Ein elu nidre inui nefesh. These are not considered to be afflictive nedarim. Ve'elu hein nidre. What are the afflictive nedarim? So the Gemara says, shelo ochal basar v'shelo eshte yayin. A woman says, I'm not going to eat meat. I'm not going to drink wine. V'shelo es kashet amid beis bebig date sivonim. I'm not going to wear colored clothing. I'm not going to dress nicely. So we'll say these are nedarim of inui nefesh. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That according to Rabbi Yossi, a neder not to wear perfume is not called inui nefesh. If it's not called inui nefesh, then what? Husband doesn't have the right to annul it. So then what is it doing in the Mishnah? So we'll say, so again, first of all, this is just very important because up until now, the Gemara kind of makes it sound that a husband has annulment rights on what kind of vow? Anything. And it's not true. He does not have annulment rights in anything. He only has annulment rights in what we call inui nefesh. There's a machlokes as to what constitutes inui nefesh. And Rabbi Yossi is saying perfume is not inui nefesh. To which the Gemara says, it's very interesting. B'dvarim shebeino lebeino. So Rabbi said it's actually quite interesting. The Gemara says we're talking about intimate matters. For example, what? Look at Rashi. B'dvarim shebeino lebeino sam hamashir es haseyar. So Rabbi says, so let's say again, it has to do with shaving or removing hair, body hair. So I will say the idea over here, specifically, the Gemara is talking about pubic hair. So the concern over here is she refuses to do something that could impede the act of relations. So I will say, so this already is a different kind of neder. So the Gemara says, Hani chalman damar, dvarim shebeino lebeino habal mefer. So we'll say this makes sense according to the opinion that says that a husband has the right to annul a neder that will impede or potentially impede their intimate life. That's what it means. Beino lebeino. Elman damar eina bal mefer ma'ikal meimar. But what's according to the opinion who says that a husband doesn't have a right to annul such a neder? What is there to say? So it's actually quite a fascinating machlokes. The itmar dvarim shebeino lebeino. In general, both say a wife makes a neder, and it's dvarim shebeino lebeino is the euphemism for things that could affect their intimate lives. Rav Huna Amar habal mefer. Rav Huna says ultimately a husband could go ahead and annul such a neder. Rav Ada bar Ava Omer in habal mefer. Very interesting. Rav Ada bar Ava says that ultimately a husband cannot go ahead and annul this neder. Why? So it's an interesting expression. Shalom atzinu shual shemes ba'afar pir. Because a fox has never died from its own foxhole. Okay, so I'll say what? Okay, let's see Rashi. Rashi says ba'afar pir. Rashi says ba'afar chur shu gadol sham kilomar b'davar shu ragil bo bakihu lishan shenam aziko. So I'll say we're going to see, by the way, that there was sometimes a concern that the husband could be hurt, right? If we'll get into it. But Lamaisa, the point over here is even if the wife refuses to remove hair, sort of that could impede the act of intimacy, a husband will know how to navigate. Husband will know how to navigate. He knows his wife. They have an intimate life together beforehand. So ultimately, again, her refusal to do this will not impede their intimacy. So the Gemara gives this expression, just like the fox knows its lair, right? The fox knows its foxhole. So ultimately, again, the husband knows his wife intimately, and even if she refuses to do this, so l'maisa, again, it won't impede their intimacy. Okay, shalom atzinu shual shemes ba'afar pir. Right, good. Incredible expression. So I'll say, what's the case? So in other words, we'll say, just understand what we're doing over here. We're trying to figure out over here. We have a case in the Mishnah. What was the case in the Mishnah? That halacha l'maisa, a woman makes a neder that she's not going to put on perfume. Not going to put on perfume. So the Mishnah said that, and what's the case? The husband affirmed it. That's how we set it up. The husband affirmed it. Now the fact that the husband affirmed it also tells us that what? That what? The husband could annul it. Here's the problem. The husband could only annul things that are related to either inui nefesh, afflictive items, or at least according to Rav Huna, things that impact their intimate lives. Things that impact their intimate lives. But things that are neither inui nefesh, nor do they go ahead and impact their intimate lives, a husband cannot annul. So Rabbi, it sounds like perfume is not inui nefesh, and perfume doesn't impact their intimate lives as well. So why would a husband have the power of annulment? Very interesting. What's the case here? What's the case? Interesting. She says she linked perfume and relations. The Amra, she says the pleasure from tashmish, from relations with you, should become asura to me if I use perfume. Okay, so she's creating this neder. So really, perfume by itself is not problematic. But in this case, she's saying if I wear perfume, essentially, I can't have relations with you. I prohibit the benefit of relations. So here, although the perfume neder is not inui nefesh, nothing to do with intimacy, but fulfillment of that neder will trigger the prohibition for her to engage in intimacy with her husband. So the Gemara says, Kidam Rav Kana, Hanos Tashmishi Alech Kofe Umishamashto. Kofe Mishmashto, right? Ultimately, again, if a wife says, I hereby make a neder that I cannot get any benefit from tashmish with you, so we'll say ultimately, again, such a neder is invalid. Such a neder is invalid. Again, we'll discuss because that makes her into a moredes, a rebellious wife. And therefore, again, ultimately, we'll say kofa umishamashto doesn't mean that he forces her to have relations. A husband is never permitted to force himself on his wife. That is usher. Right? So we'll say what kofa umishamashto means just there's no neder. There's no neder. Hanos tashmishech alai yofir lefein she'in ma'achil la'adam davar asol. So if the husband makes also a similar type of neder, we force him to go ahead and be mefer that neder. Why? Because again, we don't want him to remain in a state of isser. So the Gemara says, I velo tiskashed velo te'aser. So I don't understand. So now we're setting up the case of the Mishnah. What's happening in the Mishnah? She made a neder. What's her neder? Let's figure this out. What's her neder? Her neder is, if what? If I use perfume, I am not permitted to get hana'ah from relations with you. Gemara says, fine. Don't put on perfume. Why is this case a big deal? In other words, the problematic part of the neder regarding tashmish is only triggered if she puts on perfume. So therefore, what simple Eitzah is, don't put on perfume. So which the Gemara says, V'lo tiskashet v'lo ti'aser, im kein karila menuvelas. To which the Gemara says, no, the problem is, if a woman doesn't put on perfume, she's considered to be a menuvelas. So also remember again, perfume also served a much more significant role in times of the Gemara, when people didn't necessarily bathe every single day. So therefore, perfume was incredibly important. So a woman doesn't put on perfume ever, right? It's called the menuvelas, v'tis kashet v'te'aser. So we'll say, okay, so now let's go through this. So fine. So put on perfume. Oh, 1 second. If you put on perfume, then what? Then what does that do? What does that do? That triggers the neder. What's the neder? The neder is that she's not permitted to get any pleasure or any benefit from relations with him. V'te'aser. Shabbos say, it's okay. Ilabei shamai shtei shabbosos, ilabei sol shabbos achos. Shabbos says, remember again, as long as the neder does not have a prolonged duration. In other words, remember again, we spoke about this before. Technically speaking, a couple could be bound by a neder not to get benefit from tashmish up until a week according to Beis Hillel, 2 weeks according to Beis Shammai. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Hani mili heicha da adra here. But says incredible Gemara. That's true. I will say, when do we say about the neder case regarding tashmish? When is that true? That's when he's making the neder. We'll say, get ready for this Gemara. This is incredible Shalom Bayis Gemara. Hani mili heicha da adra ihu. So we'll say, when the husband makes a neder prohibiting the hana'ah of tashmish upon himself, so that's when we have 1 week according to Beis Hillel, 2 weeks according to Beis Shammai. The sabra mirsach rasechiluye v'hashta mosib daite, because the wife feels, okay, my husband got angry at me, so he made this neder that he's not going to get any benefit from tashmish with me. Okay, but the neder has a duration. He'll calm down 1 week according to Beis Hillel, 2 weeks according to Beis Shammai. Rabbi say, watch this. Aval hocha de nodra ihi. Rabbi say, what's the case over here? The case over here is where she's making the neder. She's making the neder. Right? Rabbi say, she's making the neder. Look at Rashi. Aval hecha de adra ihi be'ishtek. I'm sorry, before we do that. So the Gemara says, Aval hocha de nodra ihi v'shasik law. And Rabbi say, what's the case? She made the neder, and remember, what was she doing? She was making the neder linking perfume to tashmish. And what? Or we'll say, or for that matter, she's making just the neder about tashmish. Then what happens? V'shasik law. He's quiet. In other words, what do you mean he's quiet? What does it mean he's quiet? He essentially affirms the neder, right? Savra midi ishtik. My fact that my husband was silent. He didn't say anything. And he affirmed the neder, misnahu desanili. Ultimately, again, he must really hate me. So I'll say, you hear the distinction over here? When he makes the neder about tashmish, so she assumes, okay, he's angry, he'll calm down. When she makes the neder about perfume and tashmish, and he's silent, she interprets his silence ultimately as what? As hatred. Now look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, he could have annulled the neder and he didn't do so. Ultimately, again, she cannot live with him anymore. So now just watch this case very quickly. So remember, how he's setting up this case. She's making a neder. What's her neder? If I use perfume, ultimately, again, the hana'ah from tashmish becomes asura to me. Husband is standing right there, right? And essentially doesn't say anything. What's the halacha in the Mishnah? The halacha in the Mishnah is he has to divorce her immediately and give her kesuva. So the Gemara says that's interesting because when the husband makes a neder, ultimately, again, not to get any benefit from tashmish with his wife, we have a week according to Beis Hillel, 2 weeks according to Beis Shammai. Why not the same duration? To which the Gemara says something amazing. Again, because when the husband makes the neder, the wife understands like this. My husband's angry at me. He's making the neder. He'll calm down. When she makes the neder, he had the ability to annul that neder right there. He had the ability to annul it. And he didn't. He affirmed it. What does that lead her to believe? My husband hates me. My husband clearly despised me because if he wanted to annul the neder, he could have. A woman cannot live with a man who she thinks despises him. Her, sorry. Therefore, the Mishnah says that Allah Lamaisi has to divorce her immediately. And what Perek Suva? Rabbi say two dramatic lessons we have to stop. Number one, Rabbi saying, there is nothing worse in marriage than giving a spouse the silent treatment. You want to go ahead and argue, you want to go ahead and have a disagreement of opinions, that's fine. Argue kindly, right? Disagree agreeably. But Rabbi say, silence is the worst thing in the world. Why? Because you know what happens with silence? You give people the ability to interpret or to create their own narratives. There could be 1,000,001 reasons why the husband went ahead and affirmed his wife in the other. Why did he affirm it? I love my wife. If this is what she wants, then I'm willing to be. I'm always told I should be a supportive husband. Okay, I want to support you in your Nidarim. Wonderful. Go live your Nidarim dreams. Do what you want to do. See, he thinks he's doing the best thing in the world of being a supportive husband. Meanwhile, she's thinking to herself, I cannot believe he hates me. See, I both say sometimes we think that the way to shalom bayis is not to say things. Don't talk about the problems. Don't bring it up. It's going to make things worse. Just leave it alone. Just the opposite is true. The best thing you could do for shalom bayis is talk things out. But by talking, we're going to fight. This is going to come up. That's okay. That's okay. So much better to fight than to live in a marriage of silence. Because in a marriage of silence, Rabbi Osai, husband develops his narrative, wife develops her narrative. Usually both narratives are unequivocally false. Say what has to be said. A fight may ensue, but at least both spouses know where the other one is standing. Rabbi Osai, stop over here for today. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone. Good morning. Morning.